Keep on riding with us as we continue to broadcast the balance and defend the discourse from the Hip Hop Weekly studios. Welcome back to Civic Cipher. I'm your host, Ramses Ja.
He is Ramses Ja. I am Q Ward. You are tuned in to Civic Cipher.
Yes, you are. And we are having a wildly informative conversation with a man that we respect and that we tap on the shoulder from time to time to give us some clarity into the goings on in Washington, D.C. So be sure to stick around for more of the conversation. The one and only Yannick Gill is here with us. He is a human rights lawyer. He's based out there in D.C. and he's worked with Congress with two progressive members of the House of Representatives. He's an accomplished human rights advocate defending marginalized people across the United States and abroad. And he is dropping some information for folks that don't know, that need to be informed about how vulnerable we are and what we can do to push back against those vulnerabilities. But before we have any more discussion, it's time to BABA, become a better ally, BABA. And today's BABA, we want to shout out universities that are pushing back against the Trump administration's attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. I'll share from the Economic Times. Several leading U.S. universities have quietly formed a private collective to push back against the Trump administration's efforts to control research funding and academic policies, according to the Wall Street Journal. The group, made up of about 10 prestigious institutions, including Ivy League schools and major private research universities, has been meeting privately to plan strategies. Their discussions intensified after the administration presented Harvard University with a list of demands viewed widely across academia as a threat to university autonomy. The collective includes university presidents, trustees, and other senior leaders. They have discussed setting clear boundaries for negotiations with the government and have prepared for different scenarios if funding is cut or regulations are tightened. The goal is to prevent individual schools from making separate deals that could set precedents affecting the entire sector. Sources familiar with the effort said. The Trump administration has used the threat of freezing or canceling billions in research grants to pressure schools, citing a need to address anti-Semitism on campuses. According to a source familiar with the Wall Street Journal, the government's task force said that the administration had warned at least one university leadership group not to coordinate with others in resisting these demands. The universities have agreed they will not compromise on core issues such as control over admissions, faculty hiring, and academic curriculum. One participant in the discussions pointed out, quote, "Several of the schools have been around for 300 years while President Trump has been in office for 3 months," end quote. So yeah, they are, the Trump administration is trying to frame free speech as anti-Semitism, people standing up for Palestine as anti-Jewish as opposed to anti-Israel. And so now these institutions are having to fight this made up fight, but the fact that they're banding together means something, and we'll take it. So, okay. Yannick, thank you for giving us some perspective on like the conversation about that we had earlier about USAID and how that provides so much vaccines around the world, and how diseases are human diseases attack humans, and humans are all over the planet. And so, for people that cast their vote because they are, it's a little bit of racism wrapped up in fear. They would never admit to the racism, but they would admit to the fear. So that's what I'll say. People that are afraid that, these people are getting too much power, these people are taking too much from them, or whatever. And they vote for a person like this. Ultimately, what you've done is given perspective on how the world is less safe for them too, as a result of that. What you've done ultimately is you've reframed the conversation around how we kind of all need each other, and we should be building systems to support each other as opposed to like trying to isolate ourselves, because there are some things that are bigger than our communities, that our individual lives, our families, our cities, our countries. And this administration, I think, is hyper-focused on really one group of people in this country, as opposed to humanity, the globe, et cetera. And I think this is why we have a lot of this weird back and forth from the White House, these tariffs and, all this, Donald Trump saying he's negotiating with China. China's like, we're not talking to that dude. The Chinese empire has been around 5,000 years. We're not worried about America that's been around for 300, like talking crazy, you know what I mean? And so that clarity and a bit of levity, I think goes a long way around here. Now, I want you to continue helping us out. So do us a favor. Talk to us a little bit more, because I know that you kind of touched on it, but talk to us a little bit more about, our Latino brothers and sisters, what they're dealing with, and share a little bit more about kind of the deportations that have been taking place of not just, people whose citizenship status is kind of in limbo, but actual U.S. citizens, American citizens who've been deported to El Salvador. So share a little bit more with us about that.
Absolutely. And I want to start off by making something very clear. These are not deportations. I even sometimes slip up, but using that word suggests a legality. It suggests a process. And that is not what's happening in the United States in 2025.
Okay.
Folks are being snatched off the road, snatched in their homes,
we see
snatched in their places of worship, schools, places in previous administrations that were protected without any due process, based on the mere allegation, the mere suggestion that they may be affiliated with a gang. This is being done through tattoos. This is being done through living in the wrong neighborhood or being in the presence of the wrong people. But unlike previous administrations, it's not as simple as going through a legal process where you've been wrongly charged, finding access to counsel, and sorting things out. No, these people are being deprived of any right to due process, which I remind you, everyone is entitled to, regardless of their nationality. Being shipped away to a land where they've never been, and being subjected to torturous conditions, having their head shaved, being locked away without access to a phone, without access to their families. The term that we are using with Human Rights First is being disappeared, which is far more accurate of what is happening. And the reason why we are attempting to ring the alarm and how terrifying this process is because, as you suggested, your citizenship isn't going to protect you. Now, although I live in Washington, D.C., I'm a proud Florida man, so I still every once in a while try and keep up what's happening back home. And more, the news is depressing, to say the least. I bring up Florida because Juan Carlos Gomez Lopez happened to be in Florida, as his name suggests. He's a Latino, and he didn't look American enough because despite being born and raised in the United States, Juan found himself in a deportation proceeding to a country that he had no nationality in. His mother panicked and collected his birth certificate, brought it to the courts, and while the judge was able to authenticate that it was a real birth certificate, he still sat.
Couldn't do anything.
In a detention proceeding until human rights advocates, until the local community, until social media protested saying, what is happening? That is Trump's America. Thank God in this case, there was enough noise that this American was released from deportation proceedings. But it only highlights what is really happening without due process to suspected, alleged gang members. And I emphasize those words because in more cases than not, we have been able to investigate and look in and find not only do these alleged victims not have criminal records in the United States, not have gang affiliation in the United States, but even in Venezuela, they have no criminal history.
Yeah, I think it's something like 75% of them had no previous criminal histories.
Exactly.
What I think I heard that earlier today or something like that. So I'd have to check it, but go ahead.
No, of course. And I hesitate to put a specific figure because it highlights the issue. We don't have access to these people. We have been attempting to gain access to represent and see what is happening. Because until you are convicted, you have rights to counsel, to prove your innocence, to some form of due process. That is the Fifth Amendment. And that is what is being attacked. So El Salvador, and unfortunately, El Salvador, unfortunately, is the start of what we fear is going to be many agreements that President Trump is looking to utilize to remove undesirables, people that don't fit his concept of what an American, again, should look like. And before I wrap this point, I do want to highlight, while we're talking about Latinos today, I always bring up the case of Sean Brown, brother born in Philadelphia, who happened to be in Florida again, who ended up in deportation proceedings to Jamaica, a country he had only been to on a cruise. Because you have to understand, you can't look at someone and accurately guess their nationality.
Where they were born, yeah.
Perhaps their ethnicity, perhaps.
But not their
But
nationality.
that doesn't provide access to their nationality, which is completely different than someone's heritage. They seem to understand that with Irish communities, Irish American communities. They seem to understand that with Italian American communities.
I see where you're going.
Both immigrant groups have been here for centuries.
Yeah, I see where you're going.
But again, it's an attack on Black and brown communities that is being shaped under the auspices of deportation. So while many of us are slipping up and using the language because it feels natural, that we want to bring in a process, some form of legality, let's be clear, these are disappearances that are stomping on our constitutional rights.
If I may, right here, I think that just for our listeners, to give them some perspective, because a lot of folks haven't traveled beyond this country. And Q and I, we've been very fortunate. We've been all over the world. Just if you can, just imagine if you're in a foreign country, wherever you've always dreamed of going, you're in a foreign country, right? You're a million miles away from your family, from the political system that you believe to be fair here in the US. You're in France or something, pick a place, doesn't matter. And then you're accused of stealing a candy bar. And then they disappear you, and you don't have like due process. Can I at least go in front of someone? Is there someone that can help me translate? I was here on business. Whatever your story is, but just imagine how having some formal process would serve you as a human being. Whether or not you're a citizen of that country, you would think that's fair. And so I think that's the point that you're trying to make here, Yannick, is that, for people that are snatched off of the street and then put on an airplane and shipped off without due process, that is fundamentally anti-human and what we would imagine would be un-American. Am I right about that?
I couldn't have said it better myself. I tried, but you're doing my job.
Listen, I got a good teacher.
It's that simple. and the additional word is that, and what we believe at Human Rights First, is that those acts are also unconstitutional.
Sure.
It's not just that it's immoral. It's not just that it feels wrong. We are stating that it is illegal. There's a reason it's unprecedented, because you're not allowed to do that. And we're in a scary time where, despite court orders from the Supreme Court, who has ordered back individuals who have been subjected to Donald Trump's heinous acts, the Trump administration is still continuing to ignore them. So we're in a place where we're calling on Congress. We're continuing to file a myriad of lawsuits. But we also need people, everyday folks, who not just are afraid of what may happen, but who are concerned for our neighbors who have already been subjected to such tyranny, to speak out, to yell and scream. Because in the same way that we were able to shine a light on Juan's case in Florida and allow him to prove that he was an American, we have to do that with folks who may not have the same nationality as you or me. Because regardless of their nationality, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their race, in the United States, they still have access to constitutional protections. And the Fifth Amendment says due process is part of that.
During the campaign, during election season, and I like to pause a second on election season, because I hear adults, in order to justify their apathy or their lack of action, say, I'm not really political. I think what they mean is the electoral process. They don't participate. But everyone here is political. Every aspect of your life is affected by politics, from the way that you buy groceries, the way you go to school, your civic engagement, traffic lights,
Taxes.
the fact that you're supposed to be able to have due process if someone accuses you of doing something illegal.
Mm-hmm.
All of this stuff is inherently political. We, and I know we, because we talked, the three of us, during the last election season, saw so much of this coming. And even the other side knows that it's wrong because they denied they would do it when they were trying to get elected. They tried to distance themselves from it when they were trying to get elected. So
point.
even they know it's wrong. But now, because they're, a religion, they will find a way to back their Messiah figure with a zealot-like passion and find a way to justify every decision that's made by this administration, even when it is blatantly illegal and blatantly in direct conflict with our Constitution. We've seen the suppression of disagreement. We've seen the suppression of criticism. We've seen the suppression of honest journalism. And on a large scale, the suppression of immigrant college students. All of us are in an interesting space where there's public dissent with what's going on with the administration. And I've expressed my fears of all the things that the three of us do for a living being considered illegal at some point in the near future by this administration, because that shouldn't even sound ridiculous to any one of us or to anyone listening. Where are we, Yannick, when students can't protest, when journalists can't disagree, when even law firms and attorneys are being attacked, and some, again, preemptively bending the knee and falling in line? Scary doesn't really say it. Like, I can't find the right way to articulate the space that we're in now. And this is something that you're living every day.
I acknowledge that I'm at times afraid, because it is a scary time. It's an unprecedented time. And I've been fooled at times into believing that the constitutional protections that sometimes don't impact my community would at least impact America and impact everybody. But we're in a time where we are seeing outright defiance of not just our Constitution, but our courts. The word that we're experiencing is authoritarianism. And we often think about that word as something that happens over there. Meaning we point to Russia, we point to China, we even point to Cuba. But if we just look at the way that things are being implemented in the United States today, there's no other way to articulate what is happening. And you pointed out something so key. Anywhere that they see resistance, uprising, quite frankly, just questioning, they're attacking it. I'm going to compare two very different groups. One will be Ivy League college students. The second will be nonprofits and law firms. And I'm going to frame it within those same executive orders I started by talking. I started off our conversation. The attacks on law firms was quick and swift because they were afraid to fight back. There was no fight. They immediately thought and strategized, similar to the same businesses we talked before. Who's going to be in power? Where do we win? And they removed, again, years of precedent of working in tandem with the U.S. government to ensure that people that don't often have a fair bite at the legal system had representation. This is a public service that helps all of us. You want people to function through the courts because you want people to trust the courts. But that was attacked and removed. Why? Because statistically, and Human Rights First has seen this time and time again, when there's counsel involved, people have a much higher chance at naturalizing into the United States, or in our case, having access to asylum that they are entitled to under both international law but domestic law. How does that tie to the students? They were expressing disdain for atrocities happening on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. Something that they have a constitutional right to do, the First Amendment protections, to speak out against. But it didn't fit in line with exactly how Trump wanted things to do or to happen. Again, authoritarianism. This is not the way our country should function. This is not this way our country has functioned. But unless we stand up, unless we, the people, not just human rights lawyers, not just members of Congress, not just these Ivy League students, but you, the listener, you, regular person with a regular job that hears this and thinks, this is not right. You should also be thinking, this could be me.
Yeah.
As evidenced by the 3 kids that were deported, U.S. citizens again, facing deportation, facing, let me correct myself again, disappearances under an authoritarian system.
Yeah.
So while I'm afraid of what may happen, I'm also angry. That anger, that conviction has to cause us to resist, has to cause us to fight.
Okay. Listen, I know that this conversation could go on and on and on. You have a brilliant mind, and we appreciate your strategy, but we're gonna have to leave it right here. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to come and talk with us this week. Do us a favor before you go. Let folks know how they can tap in with you on social media, websites, anything that you got going on, so people can get some more of this game, because we need it.
Absolutely. And it's been a pleasure. I look forward to continue the conversation as always, brothers. Yeah. I am pretty easy to find, Yannick Gill, across most platforms. And also, it's really important in 2025 that we support the organizations doing the work. So I could also be found through Human Rights First. Again, a human rights organization doing strategic litigation and advocacy, both here and abroad. I look forward to chatting more about y'all in the next 100 days, hopefully with a few more wins under our belt.
Well, we look forward to it too. Be sure to follow us on all social media at Civic Cipher and subscribe to the podcast and the YouTube. And until next week, y'all, peace.